They rejected me at 31 years for being mateless, until the Alpha King stood for me and did. The kingdom of Leora lay shrouded in twilight, a realm where shadows lingered longer than light, and the air carried whispers of secrets that no one dared speak aloud. Towering stone castles rose above dense forests, their spires piercing the sky as if reaching for truths hidden beyond the clouds. In this land, every person was expected to find their mate, a union that bound not just hearts but destinies. To remain unpaired past a certain age was not merely unusual, it was a mark, a silent curse in the eyes of society. Seraphine moved through the cobbled streets of the capital with quiet grace, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her shoulders. Though many passed her without a glance, she was keenly aware of the murmurs behind her back. At 31 years, she was considered mateless, a word heavy with scorn among the nobles and the courtly elite. She had long stopped responding to their judgments. Rejection had become a familiar companion. Yet beneath her calm exterior, a fire remained, a subtle, unclaimed strength that even she did not fully understand. On this day, the grand hall of the citadel buzzed with anticipation. The royal court was gathering for the annual twilight ceremony, a celebration of loyalty, power, and lineage. Nobles draped in silk and velvet adorned with jewels spoke in low, haughty tones. They spoke of alliances, marriages, and bonds, subtly measuring each other's worth. Seraphine had been invited only because the king himself insisted that no capable soul be left in darkness. Yet the court treated her as if she were a shadow that dared linger in the light. "They say she is 31 and still alone," whispered Lady Marvella, a sharp-eyed noblewoman with a penchant for cruelty. "How tragic, such a wasted life." Seraphine's lips pressed into a faint, polite smile. She had heard the whispers before, countless times, and yet they never lost their sting. She felt the cold weight of isolation, a pressure that no cloak of dignity could fully conceal. She moved toward a balcony overlooking the ceremony, letting the crowd drift like water beneath her gaze. It was there that she saw him, Alpha King Kalian. His presence was impossible to ignore. Clad in armor that shimmered with dark, metallic hues, he exuded authority that demanded attention without words. Eyes like molten gold swept across the crowd, and when they landed on Seraphine, a subtle shift passed through him. It was as if he had seen her, not the rumors, not the whispers, but the truth beneath her measured calm. A moment later, laughter and mockery pierced the air. A group of young nobles, unaware of the full extent of Kalian's wrath, began to speak openly. "Even at 31, she dares to appear here. Perhaps she seeks pity from the king himself." The hall tensed. Seraphine felt a familiar surge of shame rising, but before she could retreat, Kalian's voice cut through the murmurs. It was low, resonant, and carried the weight of command. "Enough!" The laughter died instantly. All eyes turned toward the king, whose golden gaze now fixed on her critics. "You speak of her as if she is less than what she is, yet she stands here unafraid. Who among you could do the same?" The nobles faltered, and murmurs of surprise rippled through the hall. Seraphine felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, astonishment, and confusion. For a brief moment she saw in him something she had longed for, recognition. Not for her beauty nor her status, but for the quiet strength she had carried in solitude. After the ceremony, Kalian approached her, his steps deliberate, measured. Seraphine straightened instinctively, sensing both his power and his caution. "Seraphine," he said, his voice soft now, distant from the commanding tone used before the court. "Do you know why I intervened?" She hesitated, unsure whether to speak. "Perhaps because you wish to correct an injustice," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He studied her closely as if weighing her very soul. "Yes, and perhaps because I see in you what they cannot. A life unclaimed does not mean a life without purpose. There is more to you than even you realize." Seraphine felt her heartbeat quicken. Few had ever spoken to her like this, not with judgment but with insight. She wanted to ask what he meant, yet the words stuck in her throat, tangled with the echoes of years of isolation. The king extended his hand, a gesture that was both invitation and challenge. Come with me into the shadowed wilds. It is a place where truth cannot hide. There you will see yourself clearly, and perhaps I will see you as you are meant to be seen. The shadowed wilds. Tales of the forest had reached Seraphine's ears since childhood. It was said to be alive, a place where one's fears and desires walked beside them as if they had a life of their own. Few returned unchanged. And now, here was the Alpha King himself, asking her to step into the unknown. She studied him, noting the sharp edges of his features softened by the strange warmth he had offered. She wanted to refuse, to retreat into the safety of shadows and silence. And yet, something in her stirred, a spark of defiance, a hunger for understanding her own hidden power. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The world seemed to tilt slightly, and for the first time in many years, Seraphine felt an unfamiliar excitement prickling along her skin. The journey to the forest began at dusk. The air grew cooler, the twilight deeper, as they moved away from the city's safety. Shadows seemed to stretch longer here, wrapping around them like a living cloak. Every rustle of leaves and snap of branches echoed in her chest like a drumbeat of forewarning. "You are afraid," Kalian said, his eyes scanning the shifting darkness. "But that fear is not weakness. It is the mark of someone who has felt loss, rejection, and yet continues. That is courage few possess." Seraphine nodded silently. She did not know whether to trust him fully, yet a part of her longed too. She had lived a life measured by others' judgments. Here, in this growing darkness, she felt the first stirrings of freedom. As night fell completely, the forest revealed its true nature. Mist rose from the ground in ethereal curls, twisting around gnarled trees and glimmering with an almost magical light. Eyes seemed to peer from the shadows, watchful, curious, and silent. Seraphine tightened her grip on Kalian's hand, feeling both the warmth of his presence and the surge of energy that thrummed beneath her skin. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the whispering wind. "This forest responds to you. It knows when a soul is ready to awaken." She shivered, unsure whether it was fear or anticipation. And then in the corner of her vision a shadow moved, not maliciously but as if beckoning. It danced among the trees, testing her, gauging her presence. Seraphine realized with a start that the forest was alive in ways she had never imagined. It mirrored the pulse of her own heart, the rhythm of her breath, and perhaps the unclaimed power she had carried for so long. Kalian stopped suddenly, turning to face her. "Once we step deeper, there is no turning back. You will see yourself as you are and perhaps as you were always meant to be seen." Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but words failed. All she could do was nod, feeling the weight of destiny press upon her shoulders. Together, they stepped further into the forest, leaving behind the citadel, the court, and the judgments that had defined her life. The shadows closed around them, alive with whispering voices that seemed to know her name. A thrill of fear and possibility surged through her veins. She felt a power stirring within, quiet yet insistent, waiting to emerge. And then, without warning, the trees shifted, forming a corridor of shadow and light that pulsed as if breathing. The air shimmered with a strange energy, and Seraphine felt a tug deep in her chest, a pull toward something she could not yet name. "Do you feel it?" Kalian asked again, his gaze unwavering. "The forest is testing you. It will not lie. Whatever it shows you, you must face it." Her heart pounded. This was no ordinary forest, no mere path to follow. This was a place where fear, hope, and truth walked hand in hand. And somehow in this darkness, Seraphine felt alive. As they continued, a distant, glowing figure emerged between the trees, shrouded in mist and light. It moved with a grace that was almost otherworldly, and its presence made the air shimmer like silver threads. Seraphine's breath caught. She did not know if it was friend or foe, dream or reality, but she knew that her life, the life she had carried in quiet loneliness, was about to change forever. And at that moment the Alpha King's hand tightened around hers. "Step forward," he said, his voice both command and invitation. "Your path begins now." The forest seemed to lean closer, whispering her name, as the first part of her destiny stirred within the shadows. The deeper Seraphine stepped into the shadowed wilds, the darker and stranger the forest became. The trees towered like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches intertwining overhead to form a dense canopy that blocked the fading light. Mist swirled around their ankles, curling into shapes that seemed alive, whispering in voices she could almost understand. Every step was cautious, each breath carrying both awe and fear. Kalian walked beside her with measured calm, yet even he moved with alertness, eyes flicking to every shadow, every rustle of leaves. His presence was a strange comfort, solid, commanding, yet not imposing. She could feel his power radiating like a quiet warmth, a tether that kept her steady when the forest itself seemed to shift beneath her feet. "This forest has a mind of its own," Kalian said, his voice low and even. "It watches, tests, and sometimes teaches. It knows those who enter with fear and those who enter with courage." "Do you feel its gaze?" Seraphine nodded. She could feel it indeed. The trees seemed to lean toward her, curious yet cautious, as if recognizing something dormant within her soul. A power she had never fully acknowledged stirred, subtle at first like a breeze brushing the skin, then stronger as if urging her forward. "What is this power?" she asked softly, uncertain. "I've never felt anything like it." Kalian's eyes, golden and unwavering, met hers. "It is not a question of what it is," he said, "but what you are willing to accept. Many fear their own strength, Seraphine. Few embrace it. This forest will reveal the truth of both." As they walked, shadows moved around them, forming shapes that mirrored memories and fears. Seraphine glimpsed figures from her past, noble faces sneering, friends who had turned away, whispers of judgment she had carried for years. Her chest tightened. She wanted to turn back, to flee the weight of it all, yet Kalian's steady hand reminded her she was not alone. "You do not have to face them alone," he said, sensing her hesitation. "Whatever the forest shows, I will not leave your side." The words settled over her like a protective cloak. For years she had carried rejection alone, but now, walking in the shadowed forest, she realized that companionship, real, unwavering, was a gift she had never known she could have. They reached a clearing where the mist thickened, forming a luminous, silvery glow. In its center lay a pool of water so clear it reflected the stars above, even though the sky was hidden by the canopy. Seraphine stepped closer, drawn to the still surface. "Look into it," Kalian urged. "This is a mirror of your soul as the forest sees it. Do not fear what it may show." She hesitated, then leaned over the water. At first she saw only herself, pale, ordinary, unremarkable. But as her gaze lingered, the reflection began to change. The mist twisted and shimmered, and a figure of light appeared behind her own image, taller, stronger, radiant, with a subtle aura. Her eyes widened as she realized it was her, but more, powerful, commanding, and unafraid. I don't understand," she whispered. "Is that me?" "It is what you can become," Kalian replied. "The power has always been there, waiting. Fear, doubt, and the judgments of others kept it hidden. But now it is awake because you are awake." A sudden rustle in the mist made her step back. Shadows coalesced into a creature that was neither fully beast nor fully human, its eyes glowing a pale, eerie light. It circled the pool, its movement graceful yet predatory. Seraphine's heart raced. "Do not be afraid," Kalian said calmly, moving to stand beside her. "It tests you not to harm but to challenge. Face it, and you will see the strength you never believed you had." The creature lunged. Instinctively, Seraphine raised her hand. A pulse of light burst forth from her palm, striking the being. It recoiled, hissing, then retreated into the mist, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air. Seraphine gasped, trembling from the surge of power. I did that," she asked. I can control it," Kalian smiled, a rare softness in his usually stern expression. "Not fully yet, but this is the beginning. The forest awakened what was always yours. Fear will come and doubt will come, but each step you take, each choice you make, strengthens what you already are." She looked at him, eyes wide with a mix of wonder and something more, something that made her heart flutter despite the forest's eerie atmosphere. There was something about him, about the way he did not just see her power but seemed to honor it, that made her feel alive in a way she had never felt in the court's cold halls. For hours, they moved through the forest, encountering more shadows that tested both mind and body. Illusions appeared, paths that looped endlessly, whispers that tried to sow fear, glimpses of lost loved ones beckoning her away. Each time Kalian guided her, sometimes gently, sometimes with firm insistence. Slowly, Seraphine realized that this forest was more than a trial. It was a teacher, revealing not only her abilities but her resilience, her courage, and her capacity to trust. At one point, they paused beside an ancient tree whose trunk was wider than any she had ever seen. Its bark shimmered faintly in the silver light and roots stretched across the ground like protective arms. Kalian laid a hand against it, and the tree seemed to respond, pulsing with energy. "Every being in this forest is connected," he said. "Magic, life, power, they flow through all of it. You are part of this whether you realize it or not. And the stronger you become, the more the world will bend to your presence." Seraphine placed her hand beside his, feeling the energy hum beneath her fingers. A warmth spread through her body, a sense of purpose that she had never known. For the first time, she understood that her rejection at 31 had not defined her. Her worth was not determined by others, nor by age, nor by societal expectation. It was inherent, unshakable, waiting to awaken. As night deepened, the forest grew quieter. Even the mist seemed to settle, and the path ahead became faintly visible under the soft glow of bioluminescent flowers. Seraphine walked closely to Kalian, sensing a bond forming that went beyond words. There was a tension in the air, magnetic, undeniable, but unspoken. Every glance, every touch of hands was charged with meaning. "Why are you with me?" she asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "You could be anywhere with anyone, yet you chose to stand here." Kalian's gaze softened. "Because I saw you, Seraphine. Not the world's judgment, not the whispers, not the fear. I saw you." Her chest tightened. His words were a balm she did not know she needed. For decades she had been invisible, overlooked, dismissed. And now here, in the heart of a living forest, she was seen, truly seen. They reached another clearing where the air shimmered with a golden haze. In its center, a stone pedestal rose from the ground, covered in intricate carvings. Symbols glowed faintly beneath the surface, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "This is the heart of the wilds," Kalian explained. "It reflects the bond between magic and soul. Step onto it and the forest will reveal your deepest strength or your deepest fear. There is no hiding here." Seraphine took a deep breath. The pull of the forest, of her own power, and of the king beside her urged her forward. She stepped onto the pedestal. Light swirled around her, warm and piercing, as if searching every corner of her being. Her fears rose first, the shame of rejection, the loneliness of years, the whispers that had haunted her since youth. She struggled to push them away, to embrace the light. Then slowly she felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever known. Her magic, raw and untamed, pulsed through her veins. It connected with the forest, with the very earth beneath her feet. She felt strong, unbroken, unstoppable. And then she felt it, an echo of connection. Kalian's hand, reaching for hers, met hers in the light. The warmth of his touch intertwined with her power, and a new bond formed, delicate but undeniable. The forest seemed to exhale, mist and light swirling around them, as if acknowledging the union of courage and strength. Seraphine looked at Kalian, eyes wide, breathless. I don't know what's happening," she said, voice trembling. "You are discovering what was always yours," he said, his hand still holding hers. "And you are not alone. Whatever comes next, we face it together." A sudden rustling interrupted the moment. Shadows moved in unnatural patterns at the edge of the clearing. Something was coming, something alive, powerful, and unseen. The air grew colder, and the whispering voices of the forest grew louder, urgent. Seraphine felt her magic pulse in response, fierce and protective. She turned to Kalian, who nodded once, eyes hardening with command and focus. Together, they stepped forward, ready to confront whatever awaited them. And in that moment, Seraphine realized her journey had only just begun. The shadowed wilds were alive, and they had more to reveal. The capital of Leora had never felt more stifling. Seraphine returned from the shadowed wilds alongside Kalian, but the citadel, with its grand halls and polished marble floors, felt like a cage compared to the open, living forest. The nobles whispered at every corner, eyes flicking toward her with a mixture of fear, jealousy, and curiosity. Some dared to look away quickly, ashamed that they had ever judged her. Others smirked, eager to see her falter. She walked through the corridors, feeling the weight of their stares. She had faced shadows in the forest that threatened to unravel her courage, yet the judgment here felt just as sharp, though more subtle. The court had expectations, traditions carved in stone. A woman of 31 without a mate was considered incomplete, a mark on her lineage. And now she returned, glowing faintly from the bond she had formed with the forest and with Kalian, a bond the nobles could neither understand nor control. Kalian remained close, his presence a shield and anchor. His golden eyes scanned the room continuously, as if daring anyone to challenge them. There was tension in the air, a delicate balance of power. Seraphine could feel it, a pull between fear and fascination, both for the court and for the king at her side. "They are watching," Seraphine whispered, barely audible. "They always do," Kalian said, voice calm but firm. "And they always will. What matters is not what they think, but what we know and do." The first challenge came swiftly. A rival noble, Lord Mavrin, stepped forward during a council meeting, his face smug and confident. "Your Majesty," he said, inclining his head toward Kalian, "we welcome Seraphine back from her travels. But surely you will admit she is untested in matters of power and courtly strategy. Can we truly trust one who has lived apart from the responsibilities of this kingdom?" A murmur spread through the chamber. Seraphine's pulse quickened. She had faced magical trials in the forest, but this was a battlefield of words, of subtle attacks, of carefully hidden daggers of envy. She felt the old fear rising in her chest, but Kalian's hand brushed hers, a silent reminder that she was not alone. "I trust her," Kalian said, his voice rising above the whispers. "And I trust her because she has faced the shadowed wilds and emerged stronger, braver, and wiser than many of you could imagine. Magic is not the only measure of worth. Courage, judgment, and the ability to act with clarity are far more rare." The chamber fell silent. Nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded, hiding their surprise behind polite expressions. Others clenched their fists, unwilling to accept the disruption of tradition. Seraphine felt a mixture of relief and pride, but also a flicker of doubt, old fears whispering that she did not belong here. Later, in the quiet of the royal gardens, she confronted Kalian. "Why do they hate me so?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Why is being unpaired considered a crime?" "They do not hate you, not truly," Kalian said. "They fear what they do not understand. And in this kingdom, the unfamiliar is always a threat. They see your power, your courage, and the bond we share as something they cannot control. That frightens them." Seraphine looked down at the fountains, watching the water shimmer in the moonlight. "And you trust me because of what?" "Because I see you," he said simply. The world judges by appearances, by age, by circumstance. I judge by the truth I see in your soul, and what I see is someone capable, strong, and needed, not for the throne alone, but for me." The words made her pulse quicken. For decades, she had been invisible, overlooked, dismissed. And now, standing beside him in the quiet moonlight, she felt recognized in the deepest sense, as if her very essence had been acknowledged for the first time. Yet the tension between them was undeniable. The connection was electric, charged with a longing neither had yet admitted fully, and it frightened her as much as it drew her. The next day brought new tests. The rival noble families were not content to let Seraphine's presence remain unchallenged. Rumors of forbidden magic, dangerous alliances, and improper influence spread like wildfire through the palace halls. Seraphine felt eyes on her at every meal, every council meeting. Some whispered praise, some suspicion, but all watched. One afternoon, she discovered that Lord Mavrin had placed a subtle enchantment on the palace corridors, a charm meant to weaken her confidence, to make her falter in front of the court. The magic was faint, but Seraphine recognized the signs immediately. Her pulse quickened, and the air around her seemed to hum with tension. She reached for the strength she had felt in the shadowed wilds. Light pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips, weaving through the enchantment until it dissolved completely. Kalian appeared beside her without warning, eyes scanning the halls. "You handled that well," he said. "Few would have noticed. Fewer still would have known what to do." Seraphine exhaled slowly, relief mingled with fear. "I feel stronger," she said, "and yet every day brings another challenge." "That is the nature of power," Kalian said, "and the nature of this kingdom. It tests those who dare to rise above the expected. But remember this, your strength is not just magic. It is your heart, your courage, and your wisdom. Do not let anyone take that from you." Their bond deepened in these days of tension. Small gestures, touches of hands, shared glances, unspoken words spoke volumes. Seraphine felt emotions she had never dared to name. Desire and trust intertwined with fear and doubt. She longed to close the distance between them, yet the weight of expectation, of court scrutiny, held her back. One evening, during a council meeting, the stakes reached a peak. Lord Mavrin accused Kalian of favoritism, claiming that Seraphine's influence over the king was improper, dangerous to the stability of the kingdom. A heated debate erupted, voices raised, arguments clashing like swords. Seraphine felt her pulse racing. She had faced shadows in the forest, illusions and creatures meant to unsettle her, but this, the cunning of humans, the sharpness of their words, was more daunting than any magical test. Her hands trembled slightly, but Kalian's presence steadied her. He rose, golden eyes blazing. "She has done nothing but prove her worth," he said, voice calm but unyielding. "Her strength, her courage, her loyalty, these are not threats, they are examples. If you cannot see that, then your vision is flawed, not hers. Seraphine is not a shadow to be dismissed. She is a light that guides even the strongest of us, and I will stand beside her now and always." A hush fell over the chamber. Seraphine's heart swelled with emotion, pride, relief, awe, and something deeper she could not yet name. She saw the nobles' faces, some filled with anger, some shock, some grudging respect. And for the first time, she realized she had a place here, not because of their approval, but because of her own worth and the acknowledgement of someone she had come to trust completely. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, Seraphine allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had faced judgment, isolation, and the whispers of a lifetime. She had returned to the court with a strength born not of arrogance, but of trials and awakening. And yet, she knew that the challenges were far from over. The bond with Kalian, the growing magic within her, and the watchful eyes of the court promised that the path ahead would be even more difficult. She sat by the window, looking out over the city bathed in moonlight, thinking of the shadowed wilds. The forest had tested her, shaped her, revealed the power she carried within. But the palace, its intrigue, its scheming, its silent dangers, would require a different kind of courage, one that combined wisdom, patience, and the ability to trust in herself and in Kalian. A sudden knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a messenger, pale and breathless. "Your Majesty," he said, glancing nervously between her and the hallway. "A shadow, a dark presence has been seen near the northern gates of the city. It moves with unnatural speed and seems alive. It cannot be explained." Seraphine's pulse quickened. She looked to Kalian, who had entered silently behind the messenger. His golden eyes were steady, but a flicker of concern passed across his features. "It begins," he said softly. "The shadowed wilds are not done with us, and the threats beyond them are only starting. We must prepare." Her fingers brushed his, a small, grounding touch. She felt the bond between them strengthen once more, a silent promise that whatever came, they would face it together. And in that moment, Seraphine knew. Her return to the court had only revealed the beginning of her trials. Power, desire, danger, and destiny were intertwined now, and the path ahead would demand courage unlike any she had ever known. The city slept under a veil of twilight, but in the shadows something stirred, watching, waiting, testing the hearts and souls of those who dared to rise above fear. Seraphine closed her eyes, feeling both fear and anticipation. Her journey was far from over, and the next challenge awaited just beyond the gates. The northern gates of Leora trembled under the weight of a dark presence, a living shadow that moved like a tide through the city streets. Even the bravest soldiers whispered in fear, for the air itself seemed to thrum with unnatural energy. Seraphine stood at the edge of the courtyard, her fingers brushing the edge of her cloak, feeling the pulse of her own magic stirring in response. She had come far from the girl the court had dismissed at 31. Now she was something more, something even she was only beginning to understand. Kalian stood beside her, golden eyes sharp and unflinching. His armor glimmered faintly under the moonlight, reflecting the silver glow of the city walls. Together, they faced the approaching darkness, an unseen foe that carried with it the threat of chaos. "It is stronger than before," one of the guards said nervously, voice shaking. "It moves with intent." Seraphine felt her chest tighten. The forest had prepared her in ways the court never could, but this was different. This was real danger pressing at the edges of her world. And yet she felt no fear, not the paralyzing fear of her youth. Instead, a fierce resolve burned within her. "Focus," Kalian said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We face this together. Whatever it is, it will not take this city or us without a fight." The shadow surged forward suddenly, taking form in the courtyard as a swirling mass of dark smoke. Eyes glowed from within it, cold and unfeeling. The city's torches flickered in response, and the air carried a low, almost musical hum, as though the darkness itself spoke in a language that chilled the bones. Seraphine stepped forward, raising her hand. Light pulsed from her fingertips, weaving through the night like threads of silver fire. The shadow hissed, recoiling slightly at the unexpected force. She felt a connection, deep and instinctual, to the living energy of the forest and to the strength Kalian shared with her. Together they were more than human, they were a force of light standing against darkness. "Remember," Kalian said, his voice steady, "do not let anger guide you. Let the power flow from your heart. Control it and it will protect you." She inhaled, closing her eyes briefly, and felt the surge of magic align with her own heartbeat. The shadow lunged, a wave of cold energy crashing toward her. She released her power fully, a brilliant arc of light that struck the darkness, splitting it apart. The courtyard was illuminated, the shadow retreating in a swirl of smoke and whispers. But it was not gone. From the mass, a voice echoed, a voice ancient and commanding, filled with curiosity and malice. "You have grown strong, little one," it said, "stronger than I expected." "But strength alone does not define a soul." Seraphine swallowed. The voice chilled her, yet she did not falter. "I am not afraid," she said aloud, though her heart beat fast, "and I will not let you harm this city or those I care for." Kalian stepped beside her, golden light radiating from his presence. "It is testing you," he said quietly. "Your courage, your heart, your bond with me, these are your true weapons. Remember that." The shadow surged again, more massive and powerful than before. Seraphine felt her magic waver under the force, but Kalian's hand met hers, anchoring her. The warmth of his presence, combined with the confidence he instilled in her, steadied her. They drew together, two sources of power intertwined, a bond forged in the shadowed wilds and strengthened in the trials of court and life. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly, looking into her eyes. "Trust yourself." Seraphine's chest lifted, a surge of determination flowing through her. Her magic pulsed brightly, intertwining with Kalian's, forming a wave of energy that flowed outward in all directions. The shadow shrieked and twisted, struggling against the brilliance of their combined light. Slowly, inexorably, it began to dissolve, fragmenting into whispers and fading mist. When it finally vanished, the courtyard was quiet again, lit by the soft glow of torches and the city's natural luminescence. Seraphine lowered her hand, trembling slightly, but with a smile that reflected both relief and triumph. Kalian placed a hand on her cheek, his touch gentle but grounding. "You did it," he said, voice soft yet filled with awe. "You faced it and did not falter. You have grown beyond what I could have imagined." "I felt it in me," she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "The forest, the magic, and you. I felt all of it together. I think I finally understand who I am." He smiled faintly, golden eyes warm. "And I see who you are, not just the magic or the courage, but the soul, the part of you that is kind, strong, and unwavering. That is what the kingdom needs. That is what I needed." For the first time, Seraphine allowed herself to fully look at him, to see not just the king, but the man behind the armor, the one who had stood for her, trusted her, and shared in her journey. A wave of emotions passed through her: gratitude, admiration, longing, and a tender warmth that made her heart ache in a way she could not describe. The city's people, who had watched the battle from safe distance, began to emerge from their homes and streets. Whispers of awe spread through the crowd, words of respect for the woman who had faced darkness and the king who had stood beside her. Seraphine realized that she was no longer invisible. She had been tested, she had been rejected, and she had been misunderstood, but now she had risen. As dawn approached, the first rays of light touched the towers of Leora, shimmering off the walls and streets. The city felt reborn, cleansed not only of the shadow, but of old fears and doubts. Seraphine stood at the highest balcony of the citadel, looking out over the kingdom she had once feared to enter. Beside her, Kalian remained, a silent sentinel, his golden eyes reflecting both the rising sun and the depth of his feelings. "I never imagined I could feel this," she whispered. "After all the years of judgment, shame, and fear, I feel like I belong." "You do," Kalian said, his voice gentle. "You always did. You just needed to see it for yourself." The bond between them had grown stronger than either had anticipated. It was no longer merely magical. It was emotional, spiritual, and unbreakable. They had faced shadows in the forest, threats in the city, and the trials of the human heart, and emerged stronger together. Yet even in this moment of triumph, Seraphine felt a tug of anticipation. The world was vast, and the shadowed wilds had taught her that power and destiny never rested. New challenges might come, but for now she was ready. She had the strength, the wisdom, and the bond with Kalian to face whatever the future held. As they stood side by side, Kalian took her hand, lifting it to his lips in a gesture that was both intimate and solemn. "We have survived the darkness," he said, "and we have found light together. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." Seraphine smiled, a quiet joy filling her heart. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly valued, and truly free. She no longer carried the weight of rejection or the fear of being mateless. She had found her place, her power, and her partner, the one who saw her not for what she lacked, but for all that she was. The city of Leora, bathed in the gentle light of dawn, seemed to hum in approval. The towers gleamed, the streets glistened, and the whispers of the people carried admiration, hope, and awe. A kingdom that had once doubted her now recognized her strength. And as the wind carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth from the gardens below, Seraphine felt a sense of peace unlike any she had known. She was no longer a shadow in the eyes of others. She was a light in her own right, guided by courage, wisdom, and the bond she shared with the Alpha King. Yet, even in triumph, she knew the world would continue to test those who dared to rise above fear and expectation. The shadowed wilds had shown her that. But now she faced the future with confidence, with the strength of her magic, and with a heart that had been tempered by trials and love. "Shall we see what tomorrow brings?" Kalian asked, eyes bright with curiosity and warmth. Seraphine nodded, squeezing his hand. "Together," she said. And with that, the kingdom of Leora awakened fully to a new era. A queen in her own right, not by title alone but by courage and heart, stood beside the Alpha King. The shadow of rejection had been banished, replaced by light, strength, and a promise of new beginnings. The sun rose higher, casting a golden glow across the city, and Seraphine knew that she had not only survived her trials, she had transcended them. She had claimed her place, her power, and her destiny. And as the first birds sang and the streets slowly filled with life, the bond between Seraphine and Kalian pulsed quietly, a steady, unbreakable rhythm of love, trust, and shared purpose. Whatever challenges the world might bring, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and united. The kingdom of Leora had changed, and so had Seraphine. The story of rejection, shadow, and awakening had reached its triumphant end. But the promise of future adventures, challenges, and the magic of the bond they shared lingered, endless as the light of dawn.